Good afternoon. We want to welcome everybody to another episode of You and the Law podcast show, brother. That's a jam right there. That's the way to open up a podcast, right?
It is, man.
Yeah. How you
It
doing? How you
definitely
doing
is.
today?
Doing good, man. How about you?
Man, I'm doing good, man. It's always good to get together on a Thursday afternoon on You and the Law podcast, one of the hottest podcast shows you can listen to be informative about topics related to policing in America. And man, tonight we've got on a guest who is an award-winning author. So man, we're excited to have her on our podcast show, and we want to those who are tuning in on our YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We want to definitely thank you all. And if you are on YouTube, uh, you won't be able to chat with us and put any comments, but if you are listening to us on our You and the Law podcast Facebook page, or if you're listening and watching on LinkedIn, you can put comments in the chat. They'll pop up and we'll get to those comments throughout the chat. But again, we want to thank everybody for tuning in and joining us for this for our guest tonight. And let's bring on our guest. And Chief Humphrey, man, you gotta do the swag thing, man. You got some swag in you, brother.
I was born with swag. I, it's in my DNA, man. My dad was swaggy.
No, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely want to thank you for tuning in and joining us tonight. We are definitely honored to have you on the podcast, and you know, uh, I want to make sure Mrs. Smith, thank you. So we want to, you know, just have a. This is, be just relax, be calm. We're gonna have some fun talking about you, your book, and so why don't you just start off by telling us who you are, where you come from, and most important, how you got into policing.
So, yes, my name is Irene Reyes-Smith, and I'm one of six children to my mother and dad who are of Hispanic descent.
Oh,
Yes, that's
okay,
where the Reyes comes from.
yeah.
Yes. How I got into policing.
Where's your family from?
So, my mom is from Dominican Republic,
Okay.
and dad is from Ecuador.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right? Okay.
Ecuador, yeah.
yeah,
Ecuador and Dominican Republic,
yes, Dominican.
yeah.
Yes.
Do you are you fluent in either?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. In Spanish, speak
Okay.
it and write it.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All
hmm
right.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yes, yes. So, how I got into policing, just over the years, watching my mom, because she worked at the Mayflower Hotel. So,
Was that
just
it? Was that in DC?
yes, the Mayflower
Okay.
Hotel. She's on Connecticut Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Marriott owns it now,
Mm-hmm.
but they're right off Connecticut Avenue, Northwest. So, just watching my mom, how she would, just serve people and the help that she would give them, that inspired me. And I was like, oh, I want to be able to, help people along the way and, just different things and just be there for them. So one day I was just like, I want to become a police. So at the time, you guys probably remember, I was working at Ames department store.
Oh, yeah.
Ames.
You
Thanks.
I don't remember. I
don't
don't.
remember Ames?
No, I'm from Dallas, so we
Oh,
had
okay.
we
Okay.
had
So that probably didn't have Ames.
yeah we had
Tell
Macy's,
me,
which was Sanger Harris or
Okay. Okay.
Sanger
It
Dill,
Harris.
it's
Dillard
Dillards.
almost, yeah,
Sanchez.
it's almost like maybe a couple of steps under Target or Walmart.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
okay. Okay.
Yeah. So while working there, they had off-duty police officers that were working. So I went up to one of the guys and I was like, "What do I need to do to become a police?" So he asked me how old I was. So I told him. So at the time, I was able to get into the cadet program. And that's how I started out. I went through the cadet program, and from there, I graduated and became an officer.
With the
So I was,
with and that was with the DC Metropolitan Police Department.
yes, Metropolitan Police Department. So I was a cadet for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then I turned over and became a sworn officer for the
Okay.
Metropolitan Police Department.
Miss
Okay.
Irene, was that because you were too young to join?
Yes,
So they had did work
yeah,
in that program. Okay. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
because with the law, you actually have to be 21 in order to carry
Yes.
a weapon. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So was um I was 19 at the time.
Okay.
So I wasn't, old enough.
So how did your mom and dad feel? How did your parents feel about you venturing over into? Because I'm pretty sure they probably wanted you to become uh, anything else other than a police officer, other than a
Yeah.
woman wearing a badge, carrying a gun. How did they how did they feel about you saying, "Hey, this is a career that I want to get into"? So how was their response?
Yeah, so my mom, she was really hesitant a lot about it. She was like, "Are you sure? You sure that's what you want to do?" She was like, "You sure?" She was like, "I can't see you carrying a gun." And she just got like, "Yo, you sure?" I was like, "Yes, mom, that's what I want to do." I said, "I want to, be able to help people, change people's perspective on things and just be out in the community and, helping."
Hmm.
So she wasn't too thrilled on it. And my dad, he kind of was like, if that's your dream, if that's what you want to do, then, go for it.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My mom was really the one that she wasn't too
Yeah.
on board with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So Miss Irene, Kathy Lanier,
Hmm.
was she there when she did she come up? She came up to the ranks, didn't she?
She did, but she wasn't the chief at the time when I joined.
Right. Okay.
I,
Ron
I,
Ham.
even, I don't even think she was an officer at that time yet.
Okay. Ron
Yeah.
Hampton.
Ronald Hampton. It's
Okay.
funny you mentioned Ronald Hampton. He was the chair of the National Black
National
Police
Black Police
Association
Association.
that I
Yes.
was a member of, and he
Yes.
was in charge of our DC chapter.
Yes.
And also, my book, The Badge, he has a part in there.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Him and Marcus Jones, who just retired from Montgomery County Police Department.
And then there's another gentleman, Richard. I cannot think of Richard's last name. We call him Mr. Richard.
Hmm.
He was there 40 some years.
Okay, okay. Yeah,
Uh,
Ronald Hampton, he retired from the 3rd District Police
okay.
Station.
Okay. I'm gonna remember Richard's last name and I'll try to remember before we get off the air.
Okay, okay. Absolutely.
Yeah. So coming from having uh, the background that you come from, how was that experience getting into a major city police department, being a black woman? How was that accepted? Uh, and this was in what
This was in 90.
in '90? So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So because one of the things that we've talked about on our podcast is just some of the obstacles, some of the challenges that black women have faced getting into this profession,
Hmm.
especially with in major city police departments. And so, what was your experience coming in? Were there other black women who were mentors who really, helped you and guide you through this process of going through in a police academy?
Hmm. So, like I said, when I came on, I came through the cadet program, which is a little different process. You don't get as much slack or much resistance coming in that way.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until I became an actual police officer, and as time went on, that's when I started seeing, the challenges, the trials, and, the struggles as being a Black woman. on the
Hmm.
police department.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How many other black women at when you came on were on the DC Metropolitan Police Department?
It was quite a bit. It was quite a bit black. It was quite a bit black females, and I had maybe like two sergeants, two female sergeants at
Hmm.
the time when I came on that I really gravitated to, and I had one desk sergeant who, they really helped me out a lot. So there were women, already there that were undergirding us and, taking us by our hands and kind of like, walking us through what we
Hmm.
need to look out for, what we need to do, just to maintain our womanhood on the job.
Yeah, yeah.
Miss
So
Irene,
go ahead.
Miss Irene, we hear about Washington, D.C., and a lot of people who are not familiar with Washington, D.C., being the nation's capital, they believe it's this large mass of land. But Washington, D.C. is probably one of the smallest major cities in the nation. And you're probably talking about how many officers?
Ooh, at that time, I would say we had close to probably about 5,500 officers. We had a lot.
5,500 officers. And then you're talking about less than, correct me if I'm wrong, less than 50 square miles.
Hmm.
You're talking about less than 50 square miles. That's a lot of officers.
Yeah, we had a lot of officers
A
back
lot of
then.
officers. So I just wanted to kind of share that with the audience,
Right.
with our audience. A lot of people think it's just this huge mass of land,
No,
hundreds and hundreds of miles, but
no.
it's under 50 square miles, the total size of Washington D.C.
Yes, we had a lot of officers back then.
Yeah. So what precinct were you assigned to once you became an officer?
So when I started out, I was assigned to the fifth district, which is on Bladensburg Road in Northeast.
Okay. Okay. And how long were you at that district?
I was there from say like 92 to about maybe like 2000. And in between there, I moved to like different specialized unit. I moved to a narcotics building where I did like undercover prostitution.
Hmm.
And then I went to the third district for a little bit. And then from there, I worked at our youth division department. And then from there, I ended up going to the fourth district. Um,
When you said working in the prostitution division, man, I know your mom, your parents, your family was like, whoa, wait a second, Irene, what you doing here? You
yeah,
can't be,
yeah, that detail was something.
especially in DC. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that was an experience.
yeah, yeah. So you left, you did that, and then you got involved in some uh, some youth some youth programs or
Yeah, youth
okay,
division. And then when
you,
I went to the fourth district, that's when I started doing truancy.
okay, okay, okay.
Hmm.
So and just as Chief Humphrey just mentioned about DC, and a lot of people think you've got so many different agencies in DC. You got
Yeah.
Secret Service, Metropolitan Police. You got all these the county
Hmm.
law enforcement. What
And
Go ahead, Keith.
I think people don't realize is that the Secret Service has a uniform branch. I think
Yeah,
They
they
do. They
think
do.
Secret Service, what you see in the suits, for
Hmm.
dignitary protection, but they actually have a uniformed
Hmm.
branch.
They
hmm
do. They
yeah,
do.
yeah. So were you ever assi- uh, assigned anywhere around that White House division of?
So we have a SOD unit, which is our specialized unit,
Hmm.
and they normally did like when we would have like parades, when the president would come through or like just different escorts, they would normally like handle that, but I did at one point have, the privilege of kind of like working with them and working with the Secret Service. Because at one time I had a take home cruiser. So with that, you got a little bit more, privileges.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. All right. So when did you let's get into the your book. When did you start writing these books before you retired? So let's kind of when did you retire from the police department?
So I retired in 21, and then I went back as a senior officer,
Okay.
and then I did a year and 6 months, and then I left in 23.
So
Oh,
what
okay.
made you go back? What made you go back as a senior officer?
So at that time, with the tier that I was in, you had to be 25 years of service and
Okay.
50, but of course I didn't have the age. So I ended up doing 31 years.
Got
So
you.
I was like, let me just retire so I know that, that's safe. And then I was like, oh, well, I still have a little bit more that I can give them. So when I went back, I ended up helping with the cadet program.
Okay.
Oh,
So I
okay.
kind of, gave back to the cadets and, just kind of was schooling them and, letting them know the ins and outs of, the cadet program, the police department, and just, to make sure that it was something that they were actually wanting to do and had their heads in the right place.
Okay.
Hmm.
So Chief Smith, Pamela Smith, is the chief now. I think she was appointed what in 23. Uh,
Hmm.
She's a
did you?
woman of Zeta Phi Beta.
Yeah. So as I was leaving, she was coming in.
Okay.
I
Okay.
didn't
So
really, yeah. So when I kind of left, that's when Conti was retiring.
okay.
So I didn't
Okay.
really get to like work up under her tutelage.
Okay. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. If I'm mistaken, didn't Chief Ramsey didn't was he in
Mm-hmm.
DC? Chief, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Ramsey, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Pennington also.
Pennington, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah. I saw a lot of Chief Forward.
Yeah.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
chiefs
yeah.
came through.
Yeah.
So,
A lot of Chiefs.
yeah, so Miss Irene, so were you ever introduced or a part of Noble? Noble is has a big
Yeah, a
DC
woman's
chapter.
right, the women's chapter. No, I wasn't. And once I left the MBPA, I wanted to like get a Noble, but the chapter here, it was kind of hard or not, yeah, I guess you could say hard to try to figure out like who was in charge or like who was heading it up. I would
Mm-hmm.
inquire and ask questions, but
Mm-hmm.
by the time I would find out, the conferences either had already started or they were over, or
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So what gave you the vision to write your first book, and what was that first book that you wrote?
So, what gave me the vision? Actually, it's funny you said because I never imagined me being an author. And what happened was, my goddaughter, she had written a book. So when her book came out, I called her. I said, "Hey," I said, "how did you get your book started? What did you do?" And she kind of like, walked me through some steps. And I was like, you know what? I said, I should write a book. And she's like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah. So once she gave me the information, I started, I sat down and just started thinking of what it was that I wanted to write about. And that's when I came up with Surviving the Badge. And it's funny that you asked that because how I came up with that title was because everything that I was going through in my life at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and it was what the Lord had given me. Because first I prayed about it, and I was like, okay, Lord, what would this title be, and what would you have me to write in it? And just as I'm speaking to you, He was like, this is the title I want you to do, and I want you to write it just as I'm giving it to you. So The book is of my life story, through the police department and the challenges and what I was going through with my son at the time, with me being on the
Hmm.
police department and him deciding that he wanted to live a life on the other side of the law. So that's why I got
Okay.
survival edge. Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. All right.
And
Okay.
that's
That was your first book, Surviving the Badge.
right. That was the first
Yeah.
book. Hmm.
Tell
Hmm.
Okay.
us a little bit
Okay.
about that book.
Yeah.
So that book I talked about. So as I was telling you, I was doing truancy, and it seemed as though almost everything was like orchestrated, I guess, for this book to be written, because here I am picking up other people's kids because they didn't want to go to school, and then now my son deciding he don't want to go to school.
Hmm.
So here I am in law enforcement, and having to deal with him not wanting to go to school, and I'm picking up other people's kids. So it kind of like worked hand in hand, because I was able to really connect with the parents as to what they were going through. So while being in that position, it really helped out a lot. And I kind of felt what a lot of these parents was going through, because here I am myself going through the same thing.
Hmm.
So with that, I found out later, from my son, that the kids that I were picking up, some of them and taking them back to school, they were going to his school. So once they found out that I was his mom, he was like, "Oh, your mother 50, she picking us up," and so it wasn't ended up good for him. So
Hmm.
he was like, "I don't want to go to that school. People knowing what you're doing, the profession you have." So I ended up moving him from that school to another school, and that helped out a whole lot. But then, there were still other challenges, that he was dealing with,
Hmm.
as it relates, to me being in law enforcement. He was like, "Of all jobs, this is the job that you decide to pick." I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." I
Well,
said,
kind of like, hey, I picked the job before you were born, so
"Right,
yeah, yeah.
right,
He didn't have a choice.
right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly."
Yeah.
So yeah, so with that book, I mean, it was really challenging, and I was like, "Lord, are you serious?" And I was like, he was like, "Yeah." He said, "Because this book is gonna help other people." So I talk about in the book, how my son had got shot at. It was another situation where the Lord had me get up in the middle of the night and anoint my son, anoint a pair of shoes he had there. And I was like, "Why am I doing this?" But I did it.
Hmm.
And to come to find out, he was around my aunt's house one evening, and I told his sister to go pick him up. But of course, him being a male, didn't want to listen and being hard headed. There was a drive by shooting, and those very same shoes that I anointed, the bullet grazed that shoe and bounced off of it and hit him in the thumb. So he
Oh
got,
wow.
grazed in the thumb, right? And
Yeah.
the other two boys got paralyzed.
Oh wow.
I said,
Wow.
it was nothing but the
Yeah.
grace of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, with all of that, so, all of that is in the book.
Hmm.
And I just believe that, we go through certain, situations and trials because it's a testament for somebody else. And,
Yeah.
we just don't know how we're going to help other people.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to read something that's just a brief deal about the book. It says, in her novel "Surviving the Bad," she writes about defending her right to serve and protecting her son from a system that is ready and willing to make him a statistic. Uh, as you talk, as you take this walk through with the author, you will feel the heartbreak of a mother's challenge to help the world see her son through her eyes. And I guess for being, I mean, first and foremost, you're a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Second, you become a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
You're a woman of faith, and
Mm-hmm.
here you are you're working in a system that is not really there to really help young black men and young black women. And as it states, they're just going to become a statistic. So, in your position, uh, how did you navigate through some of those challenges, and knowing that everybody knows who your son is, and
Mm-hmm.
your son and your son knows who the police officers are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 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 And for me, that was the biggest challenge. And what I had to do, I stayed praying, I stayed talking to him. But the one thing that I can really remember, I had a village around me. I had, a lot of police officers that really helped me out a lot. And a lot of male officers, they talked to my son,
Hmm.
they kind of like guided him through, and explaining, life to him, and like, look, you have to really listen to your mom and do what you need to do, if you want things to end out a certain way for you.
Hmm.
So, you know, I still believe in it takes a village to raise a child,
Yeah.
and we've gotten away from that a lot, especially, but it is still needed. It is really
Yeah.
still needed, especially for our males.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is
It,
needed.
it definitely is. So you write your first book, um, Surviving the Badge. What was the inspiration for the second book?
So,
And what
let me say,
was the second book? Was that
the
women in
woman
blue?
in blue.
Women in blue. Okay.
Yeah. So let me say this. Getting back to the surviving the badge, the other thing that I realized, too, the bullying that still goes on in school. You know, I don't know how that situation can really be resolved. But the one
Hmm.
thing I can say is, as parents, we have to talk to our kids, we have to listen to our kids, and we just have to be there for them. Because at the end of the day, I know with that law enforcement position, there were times that, I was gone a lot,
Hmm.
because of my work schedule. And that's what I mean by when I say the village around you, my family, they stepped in and they helped with the kids. And you have to have that with these male children. So,
Yeah.
because a lot of times, what my son was explaining to me was that, he was being bullied in school. And now here I
Hmm.
am in law enforcement. So that's real. And that's why you see a lot of these kids now, they're bringing these guns to school.
Yeah.
A lot of them turn to the streets because they figure the streets can protect them. So
Hmm.
we really have to rally around our children and be their safe place and be there for them, and let them know that it's okay, to come to adults. Don't feel embarrassed or don't feel ashamed because you're being bullied.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because wow, what happens is the one that's being bullied, then they become a bully,
The book.
and
Yeah.
it just goes on and on. So with that being said, it's real out here. It's real in these schools.
Hmm.
For the woman in blue,
So I want to go
oh,
back to something real quick.
mm-hmm,
Being a police officer in an inner city, raising kids in an inner city, in DC, in that, even when you think about outside of DC, that Baltimore, that Maryland area, just that culture there,
mm-hmm,
which is much different than any other parts of the country. I mean,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
kind of talk to us about just that experience in navigating. And how many kids do you have?
Too.
Two. In
Mm-hmm.
navigating that with your kids, how did they overcome some of those challenges?
So yeah, so this DMV area, because of that, the dynamics of it,
Hmm.
it's really hard in being a parent because if you don't have the resources or the support that you need, it's hard for kids, especially, in the summertime when they're running free and running rapid if they're not working a summer job, or the ones that are not in camps. And a lot of the camps, after you get to a certain age, they can't go anyway.
Right.
So
Hmm.
to try to find activities, for them and for them to be in, it's really hard for a parent, especially if you're trying to make it, um, you know, after paying your bills and whatever else you have to do. A lot of these camps, they're just not affordable for some of our teenagers.
Right.
And then some of them, they're like, well, I don't want to do, I don't want to do that type of camp. And that's why back then, those trade schools are very important. They
Mm-hmm.
are very important, for our youth, because they can go and, become something, because everybody's not going to go to college. And what helped me, and, while being in truancy, there's a school that I found for my son, which is called New Beginnings, and they still exist till today. And that helped him tremendously, because they have mechanic, barbering, wood shop, and those were things that he wanted to be into. And Mr. Dante Davis, he is in charge, and that is an excellent school. For any parent that's listening, that's an excellent school to put your child in. So, it's there are resources out there, but sometimes they make it so hard, for parents to find out, or some of them, they just can't afford it. So with the DMV area, you really have to keep your kids active to keep them out of the streets,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like a lot of these kids, the streets are raising them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then a lot of them, they want the attention, they want the structure, they want all of that, but it is hard for them.
Yeah.
It's hard
Yeah.
for them.
And I think that's one of the things that we continue to see in.
Mm,
His little grandbabies.
I see. See that village. You see what I'm talking about? That village.
But let me ask you this. Let's go back to the first book really
Mhm.
quickly. Um, you talked about your concerns about your son uh, being in that system, and so I guess what we're talking about is that pipeline to prison that we hear,
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
where where black kids
Mhm.
or minority kids will receive harsher discipline,
Mhm.
sometimes criminal charges.
Mhm.
And did you see that in DC?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you try hard as a parent, because no parent wants to see their child going down that path. You
right.
know, Parents want their kids to flourish. They want them to live a purposeful life. And they want the best for them. They want them to outlive, their dreams, and they want them to be better than what they were.
Yes.
So yeah, with that pipeline, you're right, and it's hard. It's hard. And then, if you can catch them, while they're young, and try to instill, certain characteristics in them, not saying that it's gonna be easy or impossible, because nothing is impossible. But I just believe that, prayer works. It works.
Let me. Um, so were you ever a school resource officer?
No, so I did truancy. So
Okay.
we worked hand in hand with the school resource officers.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, that's interesting.
Mm,
I know the topic of pipeline to prison when I was the chief in Oklahoma.
mhm.
We actually started we worked with the school district
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
We started a SRO program
Mhm.
because they had their own police department, and a lot of them were older officers that had retired, who had retired from local law enforcement agencies,
Mhm.
and that's what they were basically doing. Every time there was you know, any type of disturbance, it didn't have to be physical. They'd write a ticket, which is a lot of people don't realize a ticket is technically an arrest,
Mhm.
and so they would write tickets, and so when the superintendent decided that he wanted to go with the school resource officer program instead of a school district police department, one of the things that the citizens continue to talk about: pipeline to prison, pipeline to prison, pipeline to
Mm-hmm.
prison. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, and so we had to explain it. And one of the things that they did to hold us accountable, we had to provide stats quarterly, based on arrest, based on searches and things like that,
Mhm.
so there could be comparing then at the end of the year. So it's real.
Yeah.
it is real,
It
and
is.
you know, all I have to say to the all I can say to our audience is do some research on the pipeline to prison.
Hmm.
It's really interesting.
Absolutely. And even with that piece you were talking about with us in truancy, so every district on the Metropolitan Police Department had a truancy unit, and
Okay,
they worked hand in hand with the school resource officers. And you know, Metropolitan Police Department school resource officers, they are phenomenal. They are awesome because they're there to make sure incidents didn't occur. They were there to stop a lot of the as the young people call them turf or
sure,
certain areas against other quadrants of the city.
sure,
So they were there to diffuse a lot of that. And even being in truancy, we saw a lot of that with some of the kids. Like one little boy, we stopped one day and I said, why are you late every day? So, a lot of the schools in DC, they wear uniforms. So he was like, my mom can't really afford to buy my uniforms. And he was like, the kids are teasing me or bothering me. And it was getting to the point for him where he was starting to get violent. So my partner and I, we went and we bought him some uniform pants, got him some uniform shirts, and every day, he thanked us. And from then, he just excelled. He thrived. So,
Hmm.
just little simple things like that, just paying attention, it helped. It
Yeah.
helped because he was on the verge of, we don't know which way he was going to go, but something as simple as that, it really helped him.
Went a long way. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to, when you do a live podcast, things happen. And
I
so,
know.
uh,
No, no
uh, yeah,
worries.
excuse my
No,
little grandson for sneaking in the room. So,
no worries.
but,
No
but yeah,
worries.
but I want to remind those who are just now tuning into the podcast show that you're listening to You and the Law podcast. We've got on our guest tonight, Irene Reyes-Smith,
Yes.
who is an award-winning author with 3 books that talks about her journey in life, her journey in policing. And so we want to again thank those who are tuning in on YouTube, tuning in on our Facebook page, You and the Law, and who are watching on LinkedIn. If you have any comments, any questions, put them in the chat, and we'll get to those throughout the podcast. So let's talk about the next book, Women in Blue.
yeah.
Yes. You see, I'm wearing
I'm
my
really want to hear
t-shirt.
about
Women,
this.
Women in Blue.
Yes. You see, I'm wearing my little t-shirt. We got merchandise. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I gotta say this. You gotta promote your product. You gotta promote yourself, your image. And
Absolutely.
I am promoting You and the Law podcast
Yeah.
always. But
Yeah.
my host over
Don't
here,
do it. Don't do it.
my host, Irene, Irene, I mean, I didn't given it. I said, hey, here's the product. Just wear it, man. Just wear it.
You
Virgil
gave
gonna
me,
catch on. He gonna catch on. Don't worry.
oh, Miss Irene.
Yes.
He gave me a dingy shirt with coffee stains on it.
Ooh.
Come on, bro. Come on. People out there, they know. He got a brand new shirt folded up. He still probably got it folded up in
If
that
that
bag,
was
man.
if that was a brand new shirt, I sure would hate to see a used shirt.
Ooh.
Hey, man. Let's get into the
Yes,
next book,
ma'am, Miss
Women
Irene. Listen,
Women in
I
Blue.
want to hear about I want to hear about the women in
The
blue.
women in blue.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the women in blue, that one is dear to my heart as well. That one, I said, okay. I said, okay, Lord, what would you have me with this title? Because I wanted women to be featured that are in law enforcement, and just the struggles and the thing that the everyday challenges that we had to go through. Being a police officer, and I'm not gonna say that it was always easy. I had my challenges, so that's how the Woman in Blue uh, book came along. And I talk about different topics in there, and one for me that sticks out particular was a sergeant that I had, and at the time I was pregnant with my first child, and he came to me and he said verbatim, he said, "You women come on this job and get pregnant and think that you're supposed to get inside jobs." He said, and that's not what this job is about.
Mm-hmm.
So, me, with my feisty self, I said, well, you better be careful how you talk and how you tread. I said, because you came from a woman.
Whoa.
And he didn't want to hear that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, of
I said,
course
you
not.
came from a woman. I said, so I don't understand what you mean by we come on this job and then, want to get pregnant. I said, no, I said, life is life. I said, and it happens. Women are going to get pregnant. I don't care what job you have. It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
Ms. Irene, what's interesting about that, I was just talking to some young officers about that the other day. They were talking about some of the things that we have a young officer who is expecting, and they were asking about, uh, when we first got on, and I say there was no FMLA, when we first got
Yeah.
on, and I said I'll just be honest with you. I remember female officers being told in the academy first day, if you get pregnant during the academy, you're going to get fired. If you get pregnant during field training, you're going to get fired. As a matter of fact, if you get pregnant during probation, you're not. I mean, so don't even think about getting pregnant until
Mm-hmm.
you get off probation. And I'm like, you sit down and you hear that, and you're like, can you just imagine that today?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean, but those were the mindset
And you're
that
right.
was told to black and white females.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's amazing. I was also telling them that it used to be where the minute that a female officer would tell her supervisor she was pregnant, they would immediately take them off the street.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's not that way. It's the female officer's decision on when they're coming off the street. But that was just the how do you say it? I don't like to say oppressed, but
Mm-hmm.
just the backwards,
Mm-hmm.
way that
Uh,
that
it,
you know people thought, and
it,
you had
Yeah.
actually had female women that
what?
were telling females, well, just go along, get along, and things like that. So yeah, absolutely. I've heard that, and I know didn't they had a wasn't there Virgil? Did we do a show or we were
we
talking
did a
about
we
happening?
did a yeah we did a show. I don't know if it was in DC or if it was in Philadelphia, but there was a group of black women who
Mm-hmm.
came together to uh, file a lawsuit against that agency that they worked for because um, of the hostile work environment, and
Mm-hmm.
they had supervisors that were confronting them about, hey, yeah, if you get pregnant, you might end up losing your job. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
disturbing thing, and I'm gonna have to go back. I don't know if it was in DC. I believe it was in Philadelphia. But
Okay.
what was disturbing about that, Irene, was you had other female black officers who were not really supporting the other black female officers.
Right.
And
Right.
and that was really disturbing to know that no matter what race you are, whether you black,
Mm-hmm.
white,
Mm-hmm.
Latino, that it is a woman's right to get pregnant. It is a woman's right to still work in this profession,
Mm-hmm.
but to know that women are being, you know, pretty much mistreated,
Right.
and making them feel like, what did I do wrong? I just want to be a mother.
Right.
But it's just it was it now the culture of policing definitely has changed in the last 20 years.
Right. Right. So I know when I came on, um, with DC, um, when you go to your doctor and you find out that you are, the police department, they put you on light duty.
They did.
Hmm.
They
They
would.
put
Hmm.
you on light duty
Hmm.
because it's a liability, and if something happens, it's on the department. So
Right.
they put you on light duty, and over the years, there was some females, that they probably didn't want to go on light duty, but they was like, no, well, we can't have you on the street. So
Right.
they would try to hold out, but eventually they would come off and
Yeah.
be side. Now, where the issue came in was in reference to these lactation rooms, because after a
Yeah.
while, more
Yeah.
females
Oh
decided
yeah.
they want to start breastfeeding.
Yeah.
So that's where the issue started coming in,
Yeah.
because we didn't have designated areas for that.
Right.
So that was something that the department, looked into, and they had to start getting, lactation rooms, lactation
Right.
pods, or, that
Creating
situation
policies. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
accommodate those females.
Virgil, when I was in Norman, that came up, and you had officers saying, "Well, they can just, they didn't like that. Instead, the female officer, or the officers can go to the bathroom and pump or whatever." And I go, "No,
No.
we're going to make
That's
no,
sanitary. That's that.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah."
that's unsanitized.
And they didn't understand that, so we were able to um, accommodate with a room
hmm
that was very conducive,
Private. Yeah.
private, conducive to being sterile, and
Yeah,
also
yeah,
conducive
that's what
to
you
peace.
needed.
Having a peaceful, some serenity.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was, and it's amazing that you have to, which breastfeeding is a natural. That's mothers do that. That's natural. Been doing it
Right.
thousands of years.
Is
Yeah.
right.
That's
Right.
natural. And so
hmm
I don't understand why it's such a big thing, especially in police department. Oh, no, we're not going to.
Because with policing is about business at hand, and
Yeah.
every member, every officer counts to the business at hand.
hmm
But you have to know that when you have women anywhere, you know, they're gonna get pregnant, they're gonna have kids, and certain things come with that. So
Yeah.
you have to know that moving forward in whatever agency it is.
Ms.
Yeah.
Irene, what's funny about that? I think a lot of it also is contributed to the fact that female officers were always taught you're one of the guys, and
hmm
just deal with it,
Mm-hmm.
and don't. And so I think a lot of times you have female officers that were afraid to speak.
Mm-hmm.
They were afraid, and because when I came through, there was no such thing as sexual harassment.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you could complain, but in 9 times out of 10, it wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's it's the one thing that I think I have a good friend of mine who's a mentee of mine, and I brought her in to do a talk to our female officers, and actually officers who were um, interested, females who were interested in becoming police officers. And the
Mm-hmm.
whole premise of this was you're female. Becoming an officer does not change that.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
You can have your fingernails painted. You can go to the beauty shop. You can wear heels. You can wear earrings.
Right.
You
Right.
can have a baby. There's no there. You're an officer, but you're a woman first.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times, and so what we saw was that increase, because there are females who really think that I've got to change.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get my nail. And there's police departments. One of the ones, Virgil, the one I was chief of, they start challenging females about their fingernails,
hmm
about
Have
eyelashes.
them a certain length.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You want to have
certainly.
them a certain length, no eyelashes. And s- some of that I get, because if you're out on the street and something happens, then you're going to be looking like, well, my nail, and then,
Yeah.
it broke off at the meat. And so a lot of that, they're looking out for your safety as well.
But this was one where they were basically told that it looked unprofessional. So it was that you can't wear, you have to wear clear fingernail polish, and because if you wear anything other than red, looks unprofessional, and braids look unprofessional, and eyelashes. So it wasn't the safety issue. I can get the safety issue. It
Right.
was, how does this look?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I agree with you. There should be limits on the length of your
Yeah. Yeah.
fingernails. I get it,
Yeah.
but
Your
you don't
nails and the braids, because
absolutely
if you're in a scuffle with somebody, they take
right,
and wrap you around with them braids, you're
right.
gonna be in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but
So
there's ways to
yeah, it
to
is.
accommodate. But you don't make a person feel bad about wanting to look nice.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
just don't.
I
So
Yeah.
know. They
Yeah.
call them the cuties on duties.
yeah,
So Irene, now back to the women in blue. Now you were
Yes,
joined by another, a co-author, I
yes,
believe,
Victoria. Hmm.
Victoria from who was with the
Ohio,
Toledo, Ohio. Yeah. So
Toledo.
Toledo.
yeah. So how did you all come together to co-author the Women in Blue? How was
So,
that connection there?
so me and Vicky were already friends because she was a member of the MBPA. She
Okay.
was in the Toledo chapter, and I was in the DC chapter. So when we would go to the conferences, at some point, me and her connected, and we became good friends.
Hmm.
And
Now,
that's
was she with you in DC when I met you last year? Is that her or
she
was that
was
somebody?
there.
Okay.
She was, uh-huh, she
Okay.
was. So we connected. So I told her what I was gonna do, and she was like, "Oh," she said, "I want to tell my story." So I was like, "Okay." And it was supposed to be some other women, but at the time they didn't want to do it. So I was like, "Okay." I said, "The book is going forward." I said, "I don't care who's in it." So that's just how
Hey,
I am.
hey,
And
ain't no stopping. Yeah.
yep, once I get an order, I got to move. We got to keep this train running.
Yeah.
So Vicky joined in, and you know, she wrote her part and I wrote my part. And what's good about it is, we collaborated on a lot of things as to what we wanted in the book and what we wanted the readers to kind of, feel and collaborate with us. So in Vicky's part of the book, she tells about how she was the first Black female detective in her department.
Oh
They
wow.
Yeah, they had no female detective and wasn't
Well,
even thinking about
it-
having any female detectives.
yeah. Well, and and I just said, oh wow, but it's not surprising. I mean, you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
Ohio. You're talking about
Mm-hmm.
Toledo, Ohio. So
Mm-hmm. 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 So
I mean,
she kind of broke that. And
she broke some barriers there.
yeah, yeah.
and,
And
and
she
you
was
know the
the only
unique.
Yeah.
female
Wow.
detective.
Yeah.
Well,
And
the unique, and I think to our audience, we just they you know let's just put it out there. Female officers really didn't hit patrol until the early to mid '70s.
Mm-hmm.
Female officers, and that's a nationwide thing. You did not have
Yeah.
very many female officers working patrol,
Right. Right.
and when they did work, they were on midnights.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, and so I mean that's the road that a lot of females had to travel to become to work.
well, and you mentioned that she became the first Black female detective uh,
Detective.
and so I'm thinking about a friend of ours in Oklahoma City who became the first Black female uh, homicide detective with the Oklahoma City
Wow.
Police Department, and this was just a couple of years ago. And
Mm.
so
Go beyond
there,
that, Georgia.
huh?
Go beyond that.
Yeah. Well,
The
and then
first, the first
the
and
first
only
black
act-
trooper, yeah,
trooper
Black trooper in the state of Oklahoma.
Wow.
in the
When she,
history. Still haven't been
yeah,
another.
yeah, and so there are still women who are breaking, who are coming into this, who are in this profession, making history, being
Mm-hmm.
trailblazers,
Mm-hmm.
and we all have stories to tell, but I think the stories that you and Victoria and all these other women have are it's on another level
Mm-hmm.
because of some of the challenges. I mean, your wives, your mothers, uh, you're all of those things, but you're still aspiring a career in policing,
Mm-hmm.
but when you get off work, you got to come home and you got to cook, you got to homework, you got to get put kids to
Absolutely.
bed, all those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, and then on top of that, you have to kind of decompress and deal with what you've dealt with in a either an 8 hour or 10 hour or 12 hour shift. So
Right.
that's a lot. So you guys write come together, write Women in Blue, um, and how what was the response from that book, Women in Blue,
We got
from
a from go ahead from
just from your family, your friends, your colleagues? What kind of response did you all have?
so we got like overwhelming responses. A lot of women really commended us and thanked us for writing that book. And a lot of them was like they saw themselves in
In
our
the book?
shoes.
Hmm.
In the book. And then what we did too, I said, well, Vicky, um, I said, we can't just, just write the book. I said, we have to add something else to it. So in the back of the book, we added some scriptures, and then we added lines where if you just wanted, just to write whatever. And it's not, even though it's women in blue, the back of the book, the scriptures aren't just for women, they're for men as well.
Okay.
You know, as a guide, just to guide you through, this policing profession,
Hmm.
because it's really what's needed,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
what needed. So a lot of people, they've never seen, a book like of your story and what you tell, and then you have scriptures in the back of it. So a lot of people, they were really impressed with that.
Well, and and I think this is something that we kind of touched on the podcast. And I mean, you're a spiritual woman, you're a woman of faith, and I think there that is a piece that is missing in
Mm-hmm.
policing.
It is.
Uh, and last week, was it last week, Keith, or week before last, we had on Reverend Markel Hutchins, who is with he's a CEO and founder of Movement Forward.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they are behind Faith in Blue, and I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure you've heard about Faith in
yeah,
Blue.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I got
so,
emails that they send me.
yeah, and that was the conference in Chicago,
Oh, okay.
the community engagement conference. Faith in that's all kind of connected with that organization moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just something that you don't. It's not mixed. You don't mix that church and in policing, and I think that is something that I don't. Do you see
It's
that as
it's
something that's missing?
it's really needed, and the reason I'm gonna tell you why, and it's like a personal experience for me, and that's when I knew that something had to change. So within policing, you go to a lot of calls, you see a lot of things. So for me, at the time when I started back in the 90s, DC was considered like the murder capital.
Yeah.
So we were having a lot of homicides, a lot of shootings. So, I was going to all these calls, and it had gotten to the point where you almost like start feeling like it's immune. And that's when I knew. I said, no, I said, something has to change. So before I started going to a call, I would pray. I was like, Lord, please let me be sympathetic. Please let me be understanding. Please, um, show me and give me the help that these individuals will need, because it was getting to the point that I would go to a homicide and I would, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, another dead body.
Hmm.
But this is someone's loved one. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be that type of officer. That when you get to these calls, you're like, okay, it's just another dead body.
Right.
Hmm.
That's not what I wanted, and that's what I started noticing. And that's why when you said that piece is missing, it's really needed.
Hmm.
It's really
Yeah.
needed. But you know, a lot of police departments, they do have chaplains, but that is totally different from, every day, just needing that spiritual talk or just a scripture or something or whatever.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing, I started a prayer call, and I
Oh,
would,
okay.
yeah, and I would have officers call in and just listen, to me pray,
Hmm.
because it's really needed, because you don't want to get to the point that when you start going to these calls, you're like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and and I think just where you're at in this part of the, whether you're in the South, where you in the Midwest, or whether you're out
Mhm,
on the East Coast or West Coast. But I know one of the things when I was a police chief in Helena, West Helena, Arkansas,
mhm,
every Monday there was a group of pastors who would come and pray in front of the police department. They had been doing that for years.
wow.
Um, and there was another agency in Arkansas where pastors would come in front of the police department either on the same day on a Monday and just pray in front of the police department. And
Mhm,
I don't know, just based on, whether it's, something in Arkansas, it wasn't something that happened in Oklahoma.
mhm,
Uh, but in that part of the country, it those pastors would come to the police department and do that. And I thought it was something that even the police officers would go outside, hold hands with the local pastors, and they were praying. They were from all denominations, and it just
mhm,
wasn't,
mhm.
wasn't a Baptist or
Right,
Catholic.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And
Got
so again, I think that is, like you just mentioned, it is something that uh, you, policing has gotten away from. And I think, we always talk about it starts at the top.
it.
The
Yes.
agency head sets the tone for things. Um, and like you said, I mean, there's chaplains who are within police department, but those chaplains are there to respond with officers to make a death notification.
Right,
Uh,
right.
you
Those
have
sorts of,
some, yeah,
when an officer gets shot, when they're in
yeah,
the hospital.
yeah.
But the everyday, back and forth, policing, routine calls, they're not
And
there.
yeah, and something we talked with Reverend Markel Hutchinson about was that putting faith in blue, bringing the clergy and bringing in law enforcement together, it didn't happen overnight, and it's
Mm,
something that is still growing. And so, in his vision, in his eyes, that's what's missing in policing, that faith in blue. And
mhm,
so you're starting to see a lot more police departments really embrace and
mhm,
put on more, be a part of Faith in Blue
mhm.
events. So we're coming up on the last few minutes of the podcast, but I want to get to this next book, The Badge.
The badge.
Well, let's stop. Did you have anything else to say about Women in Blue? Because you said there was a lot put into that, and just how you all you know put the scriptures at the back of the book. Is there anything else you want to talk about um, that book?
So with the women in blue, it's a lot of challenges because, of course, it's more males than females.
Hmm.
So of course, as a female, you're gonna find yourself 9 times out of 10 with a male partner.
Yeah,
So sometimes that can create a challenge, you know, if you're married or if you have a significant other, because here you are with this individual working, say, anywhere from like 8 to 11 hours a day,
yeah.
and then
Spending
you,
more time with that person than you are with your family. Yeah.
yeah, so sometimes, it can be challenging in that aspect.
Hmm.
But, far as the job itself, sometimes you get more opposition from within versus the individuals on the street.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
So the next book, uh, The Badge, and has that been released?
Yes, it is
Okay,
out.
okay,
Hmm.
okay. So here you are now on your third book.
Hmm.
Keith, man, we've got a celebrity on our podcast, and we got an award-winning author who's got 3 books. And here, you and I, we ain't even got a half of a book.
Dude, you don't know nothing about me, man. You don't know, you don't know nothing about
You
me.
say you tell them don't come for you, huh?
Yeah, don't come for me unless I send for you.
So where did the title The Badge come from?
So the last book I was thinking, I was like, I said, what can this title of this book? Because actually, after Women in Blue, I didn't want to write anything else. They was like,
Mm-hmm.
Marvin, you have to do one more. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, what else can I write about?
Mm-hmm.
And they was like, why not just write about the police department itself? And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay. So, of course, I had to pray about that one and really think, because that one was, that one was, it was a lot. It was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And the bad came from because I wanted to write about the ins and outs, the good, the bad, the indifference of police department. So with that book, I talk about of what officers, have to go through day in and day out, from the start of their day to the end of the day. Then I also talk about how do citizens actually view officers from their point of view,
Mm-hmm.
and do they really understand what officers go through day in and day out. And I think some of them forget that officers are human beings.
Yeah.
And yeah, even though, we've taken an oath to uphold the law, you're still a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And you're gonna have those good days. You're gonna have those bad days. You're gonna have those days where, it's like, okay, I need to just take a moment, just take a break. Because from morning to it's time for you to get off, you're going to people's houses, you're listening to their problems, you're listening to their issues, you're dealing with, individuals out here that want to rob, steal, carrying weapons. So from everything, you're going to house fires, just everything,
Mm-hmm.
everything, everything. So
Then,
that's why,
then you get off and you got to go home and deal with issues at home.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that's why I thought, that book was really necessary to write, so people can kind of like understand what it is that officers go through. And
Mm-hmm.
not that it's everybody, because you do have a lot of people that support law enforcement. And
Yeah.
then you have those that, I don't care nothing about the police. I don't,
Yeah.
but when something happened, who you calling? You
Who you
calling the
calling?
police,
Yeah. You got, as Medea say, you calling the popo.
right? You calling the police.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's why I thought that book, was really necessary to write so they can understand. And I never forget, we were on a detail downtown. There was a parade or something going on. So, they relieved us and we were going to get something to eat. And one lady, I don't know if she was from out of town or where she was from, she was like, "You guys get lunch break?"
Got like you're not supposed to eat. You're not supposed to go to the bathroom.
Virgil, the look I had on my face, they was like, "Irene, don't you even respond."
Yeah. Oh man.
I was like, "Don't you even respond?" Because I was getting ready to like let her have it. Like, lady, like we're human. Like, what do you think that we just?
Yeah.
And see, that's the thing. People look at these TV shows
Mm-hmm.
and they think that no, some of that, we don't even operate half of what the stuff that they do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah. So I was like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
just you just have situations like that, and then just dealing with a lot of bureaucracy within the police department of
Mm-hmm.
female, male, black, white, Hispanic, whatever it is,
Yeah.
just and dealing with a lot of that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
and it's real.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
real.
So I gotta ask you this, and I've never asked anybody this who was from DC. I know my Chief Swaggy one. He ain't gonna know nothing about this person. PD Green.
Petey Green. Why that
PD
name
Green.
sound familiar?
Oh, come on, Irene. PD Green, the brother who kind of he was the kind of a he had a radio show in DC
Okay.
back in the 80s. He was called PD Green.
The name sounds familiar, but I'm not really too familiar with him.
Okay, okay, all right. Well, what? I don't know, Chief Humber. You heard of PD Green?
No, and you haven't either.
Yeah. Oh, come on, man. There's a movie about PD Green.
Is it?
Yeah, there's a movie about PD Green. PD Green was well known in DC.
Okay.
He was just an average guy who when there was all the things that was going on with Martin Luther King
Mm-hmm.
during the civil rights era, the riots and stuff. He took to the radio, went to radio, and he was that voice that black people in DC um, connected with. He was not. He was just a guy off the street. He had an alcohol problem, but he became a well-known uh, person in the DC area, and his name was PD Green.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think that you got that from the Hobbs newspaper, Hobbs, New Mexico.
Hey, man. Hey, just Google. Hey, anybody out there who's listening, who's on YouTube, our Facebook page, just Google PD Green. He's gonna come up, man. He's gonna
So is
come up.
that the initials PD
P,
Green or
PD
PD
no
Green? Paul
PD
David?
Green.
Paul
No,
David?
it was just PD Green. PD Green.
Okay, Paul David Green.
I don't know if it
Right?
was Paul. I don't know if it was Paul. It was just PD Green.
But I'm giving the
Oh,
police kinetic.
somebody just responded and said he was locked up in Lawton.
Uh,
He was locked up in Lawton.
Locked up in Lawton.
Oh well, he was. He spent some time in prison. He was not. He
Hmm.
was not just. He was not a good guy, but he was
He was. They
somebody.
said he was with WHUR.
A WHUR.
It's a radio station.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and so yeah, again. I mean, he was just one of those. He was a raw brother. He said, "I'll tell it the way it is."
Okay.
And my name is PD Green. So
Okay.
you gotta look up it.
I have to look him up. I
Yeah.
have to look him up.
Amy Smith said yes. Peter Green was on Radio One.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
thank
And
you,
he
Miss.
was.
Thank you, Miss Amy,
Yeah.
for
See there.
confirming that because
See.
my podcast partner will just make up
No,
names.
I ain't gonna just make up a name.
Yeah,
PD
Well, I mean,
Green. And I'm telling you,
he ain't make this one up because they heard about him.
yeah. And I'm
Thank you,
telling
Miss
you,
Amy.
he's a legend. He was a legend in DC during that time. And I want to say, I think he passed
Okay,
in the
Kathy
80s.
Hughes' husband. Okay,
Yeah,
with Kathy Hughes' husband. Okay,
yeah. So yeah, he's a DC legend. Yeah. Tell it the way it is. If you don't like it, PD Green gonna tell it. So
Yeah, look,
so
my husband just said he was a DC legend,
yeah, he is. Yeah.
and
See, I know what I'm seeing.
He was in a movie called Talk to Me.
Talk to me. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Roger. All right,
Yeah. See, see, Irene, I got a little DC history. I mean,
Miss
I can.
Irene, Miss Irene, Miss Irene, Miss Amy. Listen, he read that somewhere today.
No, no. I've watched the movie, and every time he comes on, I will watch it
He
because
read that somewhere today. He Googled something and
no,
found that
no,
name, and he wanted to
no,
impress
sir.
everybody. But
No,
thank you, Virgil.
no,
okay.
sir. I'm telling you, again. I mean, just from where he came from and how he was able to talk to people doing the
Mm-hmm.
rides was really
Mm-hmm.
impactful.
Ralph
And yeah,
P. Green.
Ralph PD Green. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Check it
All
out.
right,
Check it
Mr.
out.
Roger, you onto something right here.
Yeah. So see, when I come to DC in a couple of weeks, man, we're gonna have to. I know you. Now I'm not gonna talk about the chili, the hot dog chili place to go to in DC.
Ben's
I know you.
Chili.
Yeah. Somebody got to take me there when I come back to DC for National Police Week.
Everybody else talks about shopping, everything you talk about.
I'm
Ben's
talking about
Chili
chili.
Dog.
Chili. Yeah, I'm talking about chili. Getting world famous chili dogs in DC, man.
Oh,
Hey, Irene. I'm just, I'm like PD Green. I'm keeping it real right here on You and the Law podcast.
I understand.
So let those who don't know about you, who don't follow you, how they can find your books, your website, all that. Put all that information out there, and because I know I'm gonna get my book, so when I see you, I'm gonna have to get it, autograph signed. Because last time it was raining at
Yeah,
Tent
it was
City last
bad.
year. Yeah,
It was bad.
yeah. Hopefully it
Yeah,
ain't raining this year.
I know. Yeah. So my website is author Irene rs.com. It's author Irene rs.com. And also the books are on Amazon, Walmart, um, Barnes and Noble, and Books a Million.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Hmm.
All right. All right. Well, it has definitely been a pleasure and an honor to have you on, and
Yes, it has. Yes,
and
it
this won't
has.
be the last time. Hopefully, we can get you to come on our podcast and talk about your journey, your life, and is there? Well, hey, got to ask this: is there another plan for another book?
So people been asking me, and they even asked me to do like a children's book. So I'm still trying
You
to
trying to
see what I'm gonna
put
do.
that
Yeah,
together?
yeah. I have a young lady. She does like illustration for children's books.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking about that. So it was either that or the other thing I was gonna do was I don't know the title yet. I'm still waiting on that one. I was gonna do the children.
Oh, okay. Uh-oh, we lost her. Hopefully, we can get her back. She was talking about another book that she's coming up with the children of law enforcement. So hopefully, we can get her to pop back up on the screen. But Keith, I mean, I think this is what really resonate with our listeners is that to have on a guest like Miss Irene, who talking about her journey in law enforcement, writing a book, and I think it takes a lot of courage to write a book um, about the profession that you're in. Because have you ever thought about writing a book?
I think about a
Uh,
lot of things.
no, man. I mean, have you thought about writing a book? Are you going to be a future author? She's done joined us back. Let me get her back on. All right, yeah, we lost you there.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what happened. So
Yeah.
yeah. So what I was saying, the other one was gonna be the children of law enforcement officers.
Okay.
I thought about maybe doing that. Like, what how was their life?
The life and yeah.
Yeah, with their parents being in law enforcement, and
Hmm.
what did they experience? What were the challenges? What did they think? And the other thing which I have coming down the pipeline
Okay.
is a play. We're going to turn the book into a play.
Oh, okay. Okay. All
Yes,
right. Well, you gotta
yes,
let us know. Let us know when that come together.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That's being worked on as we speak.
Okay. All right then. Well,
Mhm.
I'm gonna for those who are listening on YouTube, our Facebook, and LinkedIn, go to our Facebook page, click on the link, and it will take you to Miss Irene's website, the
Mhm.
books. And so again, it's been an honor to have you on to talk about your books, and some things that you have coming, some up and coming things. So
Yes.
I'm gonna have to get with you to see if you can help me write my book.
Okay. One thing I can tell you is keep a pen and pad with you at all times. That's what helped me because
Okay.
thoughts start coming in your head, you start writing.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Because as much as you may think you're gonna remember it, you're not
You,
gonna remember.
you ain't gonna remember it. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Well, I know my host over there. He's a little older than I am, so he ain't gonna remember it. So
and I know for me, God was giving me things throughout the middle of the night, so I had to like get up, start writing. So
right. Yeah. 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 Chief Swagging One, you got anything else to add, brother?
No, I just want to thank her for being. I was very refreshing, and thank you so much for all you continue to do.
you guys are so welcome, and thank you for having me. And
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And we're
You're
gonna
you're
keep
you're
this journey be going, and because there's a lot of people out there that really need help. A lot of parents
Mhm.
with their children, and it's just really needed.
Yeah.
It's really needed. So I
Well,
always ask myself at the end of the day, did I do my best, and
and
was my best good enough?
yeah, and I think that's what we all want to do in this profession is, you
Hmm.
know, what small piece that we play in this play to leave something that people can look back and say, yeah, you did something that had some kind of impact on
Hmm.
somebody's life.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I would tell a lot of people, policing isn't just about just always locking somebody up,
correct.
because you can lock them up and then sometime later on in that week or probably even that same day, you probably see them again.
Yeah,
So if
yeah,
you could have changed somebody's mind, their perspective, or their outlook on life, then to me that goes a long way.
yeah, definitely. All right. All right. Well, again, we want to thank you for taking time out of your busy afternoon to join us right here on You and the Law podcast. And
Yes.
for those who are not following us or liking us, go to our Facebook page, follow us, like us, go to our YouTube page, subscribe. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything. And check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcast. And just if you listen to podcasts, type in your search and you will find You on the Law podcast. And also share it with your family and your friends. So, Ms. Irene, I know you got a lot of family friends who are tuned in tonight. Want to say, jump over if you haven't to our Facebook page or our YouTube page,
Mhm.
subscribe, and check out some of our previous podcast shows. And
Okay,
so, again,
absolutely.
yeah, we want to thank you all. And make sure you tune in next Thursday right here on You and the Law podcast show because we're going to have another informative topic. Uh, it's always going to be a blast on You and the Law podcast show. Everybody have a good evening. We'll see you next Thursday. Thank
And I
you.
wish you guys all the best.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye bye.